On my 50th birthday, I bought myself a cup of coffee. Luis scoffed. At your age, still trying to act like others. It was then I remembered Luis's first love. Eva had always loved coffee. Drinking coffee. I suddenly became a pathetic imitator. I was stunned for a moment. I've already forgotten about her. Hard to believe you still remember. Luis's face darkened, and he stormed out, slamming the door. What's wrong with him again? How ridiculous, I thought. Then my son called. Mom, could you please stop causing trouble at Auntie's store? It's really embarrassing. My daughter called too, but her tone was a bit hesitant. Mom, there's really nothing between Dad and Auntie. He just goes there when he's feeling down. It was at that moment I realized. For the past 20 years, my husband and his first love had never really been apart. Chapter 1. In the evening, as the house dimmed with the setting sun, I sifted through old things in the twilight. Among the mementos, I found a pile of coffee receipts tucked inside an album. The dates on the receipts spanned over 20 years, with prices increasing from a few bucks to tens of dollars now. I tried to recall what I was doing 20 years ago. Back then, my eldest was 5, and the youngest was 2. I was living through the chaos of diapers and messes, unable to work, consumed by household chores. The eldest was in preschool, constantly getting sick, while the youngest was curious about everything. I was overwhelmed, hoping Luis would come home early to help me out. At the time, Luis worked for a magazine. He would come home, exhausted, collapsing on the couch to rest his eyes. I always thought he was working late, but now I see he was just used to going to Missy's shop for a cup of coffee, sorting out his thoughts before coming home to drink the tasteless herbal tea I made. Tea, light and bland. Coffee, rich and intense. Real life is a steady stream, simple and monotonous, while the solace for the soul floats in the rich aroma of coffee. Ever-changing and dreamlike. I closed the album, suddenly feeling tired. Perhaps it's for the best to break a camel's back. You need the final straw. Now, that straw has finally landed on me. Chapter 2. The door creaked. They were back. 3 people stood in the doorway, each with an unusually odd expression. My daughter, probably thinking she hadn't said anything too harsh to me, quickly changed her shoes. Noticing the dining table was empty, she rushed over to the fridge, opened the door, and exaggeratedly asked, Mom, why did you buy so many good things today? Are you planning a big meal? What are you going to cook? I had originally planned to, but now, I no longer felt like it. I don't want to cook. You guys can eat out. Luis's face darkened. Suddenly, my son Mario exploded in anger. Mom, will you ever stop? Dad just went for a coffee. Why are you so petty? Can't Dad have a single female friend in his life? Does every interaction with a woman mean he's cheating? Your mind is so dirty. I've had enough. Dad's been stuck in this house his whole life, and you're still not satisfied. I'm not eating. Do whatever you want. He slammed the door as he left. Not even Luis calling after him stopped him. I was stunned. I had seen long ago that my son sympathized with his father, but what I couldn't understand was, where did this deep hatred for me come from? Luis looked a bit guilty and embarrassed. He turned to our daughter Ava and said gently, You should go too. Your mom and I need to talk. Obediently, my daughter left. In the spotless living room, it was just him and me. This morning, I had been in a great mood. After tidying up the house, I went grocery shopping, and on my way back, the cafe had just opened and was offering half price for the first cup of coffee. I decided to buy one, intending to savor it slowly at home, comparing it with the taste of the coffee I remembered from before. Then, he casually chuckled and said, At your age, you're still trying to act trendy? That moment, I felt heartbroken. Not long after we got married, Eva came over under the pretense of offering congratulations. She bragged about the origin, variety, and stories behind coffee, and how it should be brewed properly. After she finished speaking, I threw up. Eva's face turned ashen. Luis, on the other hand, was thrilled. Fiona, you're pregnant. After Eva left, Luis knelt in front of me, at a loss for words. I said, You told me she was just a regular classmate. Luis's face was serious. I never expected her to act like that. In my heart, she really is just a regular classmate. Fiona, I swore to you before. I only started dating after making sure my heart was completely clear. I'd never lie to you. Now that we're having a child, we'll live well from now on, and no one can tear this family apart. Back then, Luis had an air of youthful innocence, his eyes clear and bright. Later, our family of 3 became a family of 4. He worked, and I quit my job to take care of the kids. By the time both kids were in elementary school, I was already a stay-at-home mom struggling to find a job. I had no choice but to take a back-office position at a library. After several years, I went from a temporary worker to a full-time employee, moving up from a janitor to a librarian. And now, I've finally retired. Today was supposed to be a happy day, my retirement day. I wanted to share the joy with them, to celebrate together. But it seems now, there's no point. Chapter 03. Luis always held himself in a rigid posture. He sat upright on the sofa, his elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together, head bowed as if unsure of how to begin. Suddenly, I lost the desire to listen. I stood up, intending to gather my things. It was only then that he spoke. I'm sorry. I didn't expect you to bring her up again. It's been so many years. She's been gone from our lives for so long. The way you said it, it's like you're accusing me of not being able to forget her. I interrupted him. Our son called me today. He called Eva, Auntie he, and told me not to go to her shop to make a scene. Luis's expression changed. Don't listen to him. He's just a kid, talking nonsense. I sneered inwardly. It was pathetic, feeling both sad and disappointed for Mario. I added, our daughter mentioned that when you're in a bad mood, you go visit her. Luis looked embarrassed. Only occasionally. Rage surged up from deep inside me. I grabbed an album from the shelf and threw it in front of him. Out of 365 days, you're in a bad mood for 360 of them. Receipts from coffee shops spilled out of the album, scattering everywhere. Luis, hands trembling, hurried to pick up the album and frantically gathered the receipts from the floor. As he did so, his frustration mounted, and he slammed his hand down on the table with a fierce force. Fiona, you're being unreasonable. What's wrong with you now? What's the problem with me having coffee? Can't I drink coffee? Am I not allowed to have coffee? With so many people in a cafe, out in the open, what could I possibly do? I don't smoke. I don't drink. I come home on time, and I can't even have a coffee? Our son says you have a filthy mind, and he's right. Your thoughts are full of dirt. You're far from clean. As expected of a well-educated man, even his excuses are well-dressed. It was clear he'd been meeting with his first love regularly, but now that I'd found out, it was me who had the dirty thoughts. They were the shining moon over the mountains, pure and innocent, perfectly reflected. It was me who was vulgar, my vision tainted, unable to appreciate their refined beauty. This was all my fault, or was it? Just because his body didn't stray doesn't mean he wasn't cheating. Emotional betrayal is just as much a betrayal. It's more hidden, more insidious, harder to articulate. As if you've been wronged but can't point to any physical harm. It's difficult to refute, but it disgusted me deeply. Luis wasn't just glancing at some random beautiful woman on the street. I could have understood that, as it's natural for people to admire beauty. No, he had been staring at this woman, time and time again, for over 20 years. If that's the case, why didn't they end up together in the first place? Why did he have to drag me into this mess? I swallowed the bitterness rising inside me and said coldly, you're right. You don't deserve to drink coffee. When our son was short $20 for his school materials and I had to borrow money in a panic, you were showing off at Eva's place. When I rushed my daughter to the ER and couldn't pay the medical fees, you were leisurely sipping coffee and reminiscing with your first love. I tried to save money, couldn't even afford new clothes, while you spent your days in romance. Luis, you have no right to shout at me. The reason you're so upset now, is it because I caught you lying? Or because you couldn't shift the blame onto me? You and Eva, if you're really so innocent, why don't you shout about it in front of your colleagues? You're being absurd. Luis's face turned red, trembling, unable to utter another word. For someone who loved lecturing others, he must have been very guilty to be left speechless. I had finally given up, and said coldly, "Let's get a divorce." "Fine. Let's get a divorce." Luis's voice rang out loud and clear. Chapter 4. However, when the printed divorce agreement was placed in front of him, he hesitated again. His hand trembled as he picked up the pen, but he still couldn't bring himself to sign. 3 days had passed since our last argument, and I had calmed down. I spoke calmly. "Take a good look. Everything is split equally. The house was bought together. Even though you earned more than me, I took care of the household. If you calculate it at market value, it's not much less than what you contributed. You've worked on women's issues in magazines, and you've spoken out against the unfairness of unpaid domestic work for women. I think you should understand." His voice softened, tinged with confusion. "Fiona, you've read my articles?" A flicker of annoyance rose in me. "I used to." He looked deeply moved. I continued, "But after you asked me if I could even understand them, I started reading your rival's magazine instead." He closed his mouth, and a hint of regret crossed his face. After stepping out of the role of a housewife, I started looking for a job. It took about 3 months, but nothing suitable came up. Around that time, I began to sense that he was starting to look down on me. It wasn't blatant ridicule, but hidden in the small details of daily life, an offhand remark, a dismissive gesture, or an occasional condescending glance. These subtle signs made it clear to me that I had fallen out of his favor. Every year on International Women's Day, his magazine would run a feature on women, filled with glowing words and praise, making me believe he truly respected working women. But now I realize, he only respected the idealized version in his mind, the woman who could work tirelessly at the hardest jobs and still shine brightly, full of life and energy. Not someone like me, worn out after a long day, desperate for some peace and quiet. Just like the majority of ordinary people, he turned his head away, clearly uncomfortable. "Fiona, do we really have to go through with this?" "Yes." I didn't want to say much more and began packing my things. After more than 20 years in this home, there was so much stuff. If we were really getting divorced, I needed to declutter. I organized what I was going to take, sold what could be sold, threw away what could be discarded, and gave away what could be donated. Luis hovered around me, circling nervously. "Where will you live after the divorce? Don't trouble yourself over it. You're 50 years old, and you're not young either." "Fiona, do we really have to end it over Eva?" He was getting anxious. I put down the clothes in my hands, crossed my arms, and looked at him. "Is it really just about Eva? The straw that breaks the camel's back isn't the last one. It's all of them combined." Chapter 5. How easily hearts change, yet we lament the ease with which they do. I used to love reading that phrase. Later, during my long, over 20-year marriage with Luis, I came to understand one thing: people are constantly changing, and it's impossible to truly see through someone at a glance, just as no one can predict their entire life in a single moment. Even if they return to what they believe was a turning point, destiny will always have its own path. In the 5th year of our marriage, Luis had already grown resentful of life, and his words toward me became laced with hostility. He would say things like, "If it weren't for my fear of you overthinking, I wouldn't have turned down the promotion. There are no women at this conference. Stop being so paranoid, and don't come by the office unexpectedly. It wouldn't look good if people saw you." In truth, I had only visited his office once, to bring him some documents, but he was so annoyed, as if I had embarrassed him. After years of raising kids, I had lost my polished appearance, and I no longer had a stable, respectable job. I was just an unemployed housewife who had to ask for money to barely make ends meet, struggling to find a job. Now, I vaguely feel that perhaps he was afraid I'd find out about him and Eva, afraid that I'd cause a scene at his workplace. So, he preemptively planted the idea in my head, making sure I lacked the confidence or courage to confront him at his office. After all, his colleagues were intellectuals, while I was just a high school-educated housewife. I spoke coldly. "You never respected me from the start, did you? You looked down on me for my lack of education, because I wasn't as cultured as you. But at that time, you needed someone to take care of your mother. and I just happened to be the kind, capable woman you were looking for. So, you started a relationship with me. Luis grew angry. Don't paint me as that disgusting. I wish I had thought of you as disgusting from the beginning. You're being unreasonable. Your education level is high school. Why can't I mention that? His words took my breath away. Yes, I admit it. I only have a high school education. Anyone can say that, and I will acknowledge it. But what I can't tolerate is the disdain in your voice when you bring it up. Luis, if I had been born a man, if my family hadn't valued sons over daughters, my education wouldn't have been worse than yours. You got a good education because you benefited from patriarchy, not because you're better than me. And it's certainly not a reason to look down on me. If you, as a respected editor-in-chief, can't grasp that distinction, then no wonder your magazine got swallowed up. His face turned ashen, his lips trembled, and for a long moment, he couldn't say a word. In a fit of spite, he grabbed the pen and hastily scrawled his name on the divorce agreement. This marriage is over. We have to divorce. 9 o'clock tomorrow at the Civil Affairs Bureau. I took the divorce papers, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door. Silent tears began to stream down my face. Falling in love is made up of countless beautiful moments, but marriage is about the daily erosion of those moments. The more beauty you've accumulated in the beginning, the longer the marriage will last. Unfortunately, the beauty Luis and I had saved up was only enough to make us tolerate each other for 5 years. After that, each day was just a dust-covered grind in the routine of life. We both sought an escape from the stagnant waters of our marriage. He found his way out through Eva's cafe. I had no family to return to, no close friends to rely on. My only option was to stay in the fortress of this marriage and learn to hold my breath. And after holding my breath for so long, I eventually transformed, no longer easily swayed, and learning to see things clearly, like the Monkey King, who had to endure the flames of the furnace to finally gain his piercing gaze. They say at 40, one is free from doubt, and at 50, one understands their destiny. On my 50th birthday, I had thought about letting go. Most of my life had passed. It was time to reconcile with the angry, unsatisfied version of myself. After all, retirement is a new chapter, a time to comfort the self that had worked so hard. But Luis struck me with a harsh reality. Fate has its own plans. Perhaps, on my 50th birthday, my fate was to divorce. Chapter 6. The noise from moving was not small. I had planned to finish quickly, but there were too many things to pack. It took an entire day, and by the time the movers arrived, it was already evening. Luis had hidden away. He couldn't face telling the neighbors that we were getting divorced. The kids had both returned from work. Mario glanced at the mess on the floor, took a deep breath, rolled his eyes, and then kicked one of the boxes I had packed. Mom, have you watched too many videos online? Have they messed up your brain? Divorcing at your age, aren't you ashamed? How do you expect me to find someone? To get married? What kind of mother does this? The box was filled with miscellaneous items, memories from when the kids were young, things I couldn't bear to throw away, carefully selected to take with me. But now, I slowly stood up and slapped him hard across the face. Then, I rummaged through the clutter and found a diary, which I angrily threw at him. You said your dad was trapped by me all his life, didn't you? Well, now he's free. He's not trapped anymore. So why aren't you happy? What are you holding on to? When I'm at home, you say I'm suffocating your father. When I'm leaving, you say I'm irresponsible. You get to say whatever you want. What kind of person are you? And who taught you to speak to your mother like this? You, just like your father, are selfish. Don't even think about getting married in this life. You'll just ruin some good girl's life. Mario glared at me, filled with rage, but when he realized the diary I had thrown at his face, his expression turned guilty. Still, he bit his lip and said nothing in defense. The diary was filled with his hatred toward me. He hated me for trapping his father all his life. He witnessed his father's unfulfilled desires and couldn't bear to see his father married to what he considered a mediocre woman. He wanted to be like his father, sipping a cup of coffee, reading a book, sitting in a cafe, quietly and elegantly, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of the world outside. His father was peaceful, refined, like an old song. occasionally glancing up at the unattainable cafe owner he loved. He envied Eva, the glamorous cafe owner. He admired how she could chat and laugh with people, her sophistication, and how she was respected by everyone. Unlike me, his mother, who was just a simple worker at a library, moving from one task to the next, wearing dull work clothes, wiping down bookshelves, carrying stacks of books. I always smiled at people, serving others, dealing with ordinary folks instead of people from higher social classes. When I first read this diary, it pierced my heart. I thought to myself, he's truly Luis's son, with quite the talent for writing. If I weren't the villain in his story, I might even praise him. I coldly said, "Move aside." Mario's eyes reddened. He clenched his teeth and stepped aside. Ava tried to stop me, tears welling up in her eyes. "Mom, do you really have to leave?" "Dad, he really was just having coffee. He didn't do anything." I stared at her and said calmly, "Do you know that after you were born, when your dad went to register your name, he didn't write Ava, he wrote Eva, just like that woman with the last name he." Ava's face instantly turned pale, full of disbelief. I continued, "I was the one who noticed and thought it was a mistake, so I corrected it. But looking back now, I don't think it was a mistake at all. When you get married, would you want your child to bear the name of your husband's ex? Even if it's just a single letter, would you be okay with that?" At that time, I truly believed it was just a mistake. After all, people make mistakes. But now, I realize how soft-hearted and kind I was in my younger days, always unwilling to think the worst of others. If I could go back, I'd rather be the villain first, and only then be the good person. Ava's hand dropped, and she stepped back, defeated. I pulled my suitcase and walked out. Mario yelled in anger, punching the wall hard. Ava, meanwhile, started sobbing. The elevator arrived, and I stepped in, sealing away the sounds of their voices. My thoughts wandered. Perhaps there really is no such thing as a perfect marriage. Maybe that saying is true, no matter who you marry, you'll regret it. Since that's the case, I can only walk the path I've chosen as best as I can. I won't curse the heavens or blame myself. I've done my best, and that's why I've made it this far. Chapter 07. The next day. The divorce registration went smoothly. Luis cared about appearances. He could shout at me at home, but outside, he always maintained a polite and courteous demeanor. After we finished the registration, he glanced at the glaring sunlight, then lowered his head. It seemed like there was a glimmer of tears in his eyes. He spoke softly, "If you ever need help, don't hesitate to ask. After all these years living together, we should have some level of trust. I'll do my best." I nodded but said nothing, turning away and walking off. If he truly wanted to help, he wouldn't have been blind to the struggles I faced in our marriage over the past 2 decades. A man's career is just his career. A woman's career is her children, the household, prioritizing her husband, and then her own work. Society doesn't demand men to be perfect in every aspect. But the moment a woman falls short, criticism comes from all directions. If he really saw that, he would have known that even without Eva, I had already rehearsed leaving him countless times in my mind. I would collapse into sleep, wake up and heal myself, endure the busy days, and return to restless nights, over and over, for 20 years. Eva was really just the final straw that broke the camel's back. During the month-long cooling-off period, I buried myself in work, continuing the writings I hadn't finished. Without the burden of household chores for the entire family, I suddenly had so much more time to myself. Just before the month ended, I received a call from the Writers Association. They mentioned an upcoming field trip and asked if I wanted to join. I thought about it. I had stayed home long enough, and perhaps a change of scenery would help with the writing challenges I was facing. I decided to go. And there, I ran into Luis and Eva. I was momentarily stunned when I saw them. They, too, seemed a bit uneasy when they saw me. When no one was around, Luis sneakily approached me. "What are you doing here? Did you come to handle logistics?" I was momentarily speechless. In his eyes, I must have been born to serve others. Although there's no hierarchy in professions, people's hearts do have a sense of value. I replied coldly, "It's none of your business." Luis continued, Can you please not say anything to the group? Eva and I are innocent. She's been feeling down lately, and I'm just here to accompany her. It has nothing to do with me. Don't bother me again. I walked away, feeling utterly disgusted, as if something slimy had stuck to my entire body. We're innocent. That phrase carried a hidden attack. It implied that my eyes were dirty, which is why I couldn't see their innocence. We didn't do anything. The hidden attack was that my mind was filthy, which is why I thought such terrible things. But from my perspective, if their behavior and actions led to misunderstandings, the problem must lie with them. It's those who are impure themselves who throw mud at others. For the next few days, I treated them as if they didn't exist. But during a group photo, someone called out, "Mr. Sun, why don't you and your wife take a picture together?" Luis didn't correct them. Eva, with all the confidence in the world, grabbed his arm and smiled. "We'd be happy to." Her gaze flickered over to me, her lips curling into a triumphant smile, seemingly innocent but full of malice. She was provoking me, betting that I would still be as flustered as I was in my younger days. But she guessed wrong. I replied coldly, "Luis isn't divorced yet. Even if you're in a hurry, Miss He, at least wait until we finalize things before calling yourselves husband and wife." Chapter 8. Everyone's eyes darted back and forth between the three of us in shock. Throughout the trip, Luis had shown great care for Eva, so everyone assumed they were a married couple. No one could have imagined that I, the one who had no interaction with Luis, was actually his wife. Luis's face turned pale. He had spent his entire life guarding his reputation, but now it was utterly shattered. He glanced at me, a pleading look in his eyes. But I didn't look at him, I looked at Eva. She was dressed fashionably, exuding an air of efficiency and sharpness. But there was something about her that felt fake, as if she were someone weak trying desperately to imitate a person she could never truly be. Forcing a smile, she explained, "I was just accompanying Luis to help him clear his mind. He's been very upset about the divorce, and I was worried he might do something foolish. If anyone misunderstood, that's my fault. You don't need to be so aggressive. If there were really something between us, you wouldn't even have a place here." I didn't explain earlier because I didn't want to cause any awkwardness if people called me the wrong thing. But since you want to take the photo, go ahead. She gave me a faint smirk, certain that I wouldn't dare to take the photo with Luis. Luis seemed to gain some courage, saying, "Fiona, don't overthink this. There's really nothing between us." I laughed bitterly, walking up to him slowly before delivering a sharp slap across his face. "Sorry. There was a fly on your face just now. You didn't see it, but I did. After all, you're blind, so it's normal that you didn't notice." My eyes work just fine, though. I saw everything clearly. Luis clutched his face, stunned, unable to believe that I had humiliated him in public like this. I had always protected his dignity before, but now, stained dignity wasn't worth keeping. People quickly rushed to pull us apart. "Ms. Zoe, please don't be angry. Calm down. Ms. Zoe, come over here. Sit down. Have some warm water and take a rest." Even the photographer rushed to apologize. "Ms. Zoe, I'm sorry. It was my mistake to call the wrong name." I remained calm. "It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong." Everyone seemed to have a clear sense of right and wrong, and no one paid any attention to Luis or Eva. Eva shot me a venomous glare before turning her concern toward Luis, checking if he was okay. Luis, however, was frozen, staring blankly at me, his eyes filled with confusion and disbelief. Zoe? After over 20 years together, he had no idea that his own wife was actually a somewhat well-known freelance writer, contributing to various magazines, with sharp critiques that had made headlines and earned her interviews. He probably also realized why Zoe had refused his requests for interviews or articles. It was personal. He admired Zoe, but he looked down on me. So, of course, I would never accept his false admiration. I only let him stew in the dark, wondering why Zoe wouldn't accept his interview. Despite the incredibly high fees he offered, he always assumed that when I was on my computer, I was just playing around, and when I was on my phone, I was scrolling through silly videos. He never tried to truly understand me. He thought that the moment I became a housewife, my fate was sealed. He didn't realize that under pressure, even a stone can bloom. A few days after the field trip, Luis and Eva were nowhere to be seen. They had both left early, too ashamed to stay any longer. After the trip ended, I received a call from him. His voice was soft, fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment. "Fiona, I just noticed that there are so many articles you've written on the shelves in our house. I never paid attention before." Of course he hadn't noticed me before. His life was full of color, romance, and style, perfect for social media. Something to be envied by all. My life only belonged on platforms like TikTok, in the circles of housewives, filled with the smoke and grime of daily life and complaints about marriage. Our lives never intersected. How could we possibly discover each other's hidden sides? I had once thought about revealing the truth to him, but after he scolded me for touching his books and questioned whether I could even understand them, I gave up on the idea. The result today was exactly what he deserved. Chapter 9. I calmly asked, "Is there anything else?" He said, "Fiona, I still don't want a divorce. The house has fallen apart without you these days. I don't mean that you should come back to do the chores, but the house just feels soulless without you. Mario and Ava have been fighting constantly. Without you, this family seems like it's falling apart." I ignored the regret and worry in his voice. I could picture life at home clearly. Mario, like his father, was full of machismo. He wouldn't care about the small details of home life, but he'd be meticulous about his own needs: good food, good drinks, good clothes, polished for the outside world, but a mess at home, with only a presentable face to show. If someone were to marry him, he would never see the struggles of a woman. If he couldn't see them, they didn't exist. To him, those struggles were just exaggerations, baseless accusations. As for Ava, under my protection, she never experienced favoritism towards males. She got along well with her father and brother, but to say she was my daughter would be inaccurate. She was more like the daughter I bore for Luis. She didn't agree with me. She had her own sense of superiority. She believed her future would never sink into the kind of life I had. She was convinced she'd surpass me. Subconsciously, she tried to win her father's approval, aligning herself with him, undermining me to gain his love, attention, and a larger share of the inheritance. In her mind, her father was the one with assets, and her mother was the one with none. She was pitiful, infuriating, but also the one I felt the most heartache for, because without me at the bottom of the family hierarchy, the illusion of equality and recognition she thought she had from her father and brother would soon crumble. In the past, I would have compromised for her sake. I pitied her, as I pitted myself when I was young. But ever since I found out that she knew all along about Luis's continued contact with Eva, my feelings for her cooled. Some flowers, if you protect them too much, they'll never learn. Only when they've weathered the wind and rain, and faced the harshness of life, can they bloom anew. Now, she's likely the lowest on the totem pole in that household. I can only hope she wakes up and realizes that even if she castrates herself to submit to patriarchy, she'll still be excluded from the power structure. Like me, she'll realize that behind her, she has nothing to rely on but herself. Luis was still muttering, but I hung up the phone. Before I did, I reminded him, "We're finalizing the divorce tomorrow at 9 a.m. Be there on time." However, the next morning at 9 a.m., Luis didn't show. I called him, but he didn't answer. I tried video calling him, but he ignored that too. At that moment, anger surged through me. I immediately took a cab to our old home, burst through the door, and was met with a chaotic scene. The furniture was covered in dust, the flowers on the windowsill had withered and died, and a pile of clothes sat crumpled on top of the washing machine. Socks were scattered outside the dirty laundry basket, and clothes had been left hanging for days. The floor was stained with tea, footprints, and crumpled tissues. The trash bin was overflowing, but no one had bothered to empty it. Luis looked utterly worn out. His eyes were dark and sunken, his wrinkles deeper, and he stood helplessly in the middle of the room, glancing nervously between Mario and Ava, who were furiously glaring at each other. One held a rolling pin, the other a mop, and they looked ready to tear each other apart. They had started fighting. The once inseparable siblings were now completely unrecognizable. Chapter 10. When Ava saw me, she let out a sorrowful cry, "Mom," and immediately tears of grievance streamed down her face. Mario hung his head low, holding a broom as if it had burned his hands. I glanced at them briefly, not wanting to engage, and instead turned to Luis. "I've been waiting for you for over an hour. What's the meaning of this?" Luis replied, "They got into a fight. I couldn't." I cut him off coldly. "Incompetent. Fiona." Luis was both ashamed and angry. He could probably sense by now that I no longer held him in any regard. I shot him a glare, walked up, yanked the rolling pin out of Ava's hand, and stomped on Mario's broom, snapping the handle. I questioned them coldly. "Still want to fight?" Ava's eyes were red. "It's him. Lazy like a pig. I have to do everything. I cook. And when I ask him to sweep, he can't even find the mop. And when he does find it, he just slams it around. He's just showing off his temper. You're the one making a fuss. When Mom was here, everything was fine. You do a bit of work, bossing everyone around. If you don't want to do it, then get out and live somewhere else." Mario shouted back. I slapped him hard across the face. How pathetic he was. He assumed the house was his, so he felt free to tell his sister to leave. I said coldly, "Half of this house is mine. Even after I die, you won't get my share." Mario's face turned bright red, and he spat out, "I don't need anything from you. Aunt he has plenty of houses. She has a villa. She owns a cafe. She's 1,000 times better than you. Once Dad divorces, I'll make sure Aunt he moves in. You'll never set foot here again." Luis roared. "Mario, shut up." Ava, furious, yelled, "Mario, how could you say that?" Mario ignored everyone and stormed out. Luis sighed. "Don't take it to heart. Mario can be arrogant, but deep down, he's not a bad kid." I interrupted. "It's time to get divorced. No one's stopping you now, right?" Luis's throat bobbed as if there were 1,000 things he wanted to say, but the words got stuck, and nothing came out. Finally, he uttered, "Okay." I hurried downstairs, waited for him, and then we swiftly headed to the Civil Affairs Bureau and finalized the paperwork. After receiving the divorce certificate, Luis stared blankly at the booklet in his hands, as if he couldn't believe we were really divorced. "Fiona," he muttered, his lips trembling, "take care." I didn't want to hear another word from him. Once upon a time, we had promised each other that we would never go to bed angry, that we'd resolve everything before sleeping. We swore we'd never fall asleep still upset. But over time, we forgot that promise, and after a while, we stopped arguing altogether. Because if you don't engage, there's no friction, and if there's no friction, there's no conflict, no arguments, no clashes of words, no meeting of souls. I played the dutiful wife, and he played the good father, but there was no love left between us. After the divorce, Luis and I lost all contact. Mario vanished into thin air, and only Ava called. She said Mom once, then couldn't get another word out. I didn't rush her. I set the phone aside, switched on the speakerphone, and began organizing my desk. Finally, I had a desk of my own, no longer having to avoid writing around Luis. At first, it was because I feared his ridicule. Later, I simply didn't want to have any connection with him. After a long while, I heard Ava's muffled sobs through the phone. She choked out, "Mom, I'm sorry. I finally understand you. I'm so sorry." Then she hung up. My hand paused while organizing the desk. I sat down on the couch, thinking, silly girl, from now on, you'll have to walk your own path. Mom won't be able to help you anymore. Chapter 11. My neighbor, likely out of a mix of sympathy and pity, told me about Ava. She had moved out of the house, without me, her mother, to back her up. She found herself at the bottom of the household hierarchy. The whole family expected her to do the laundry, cook, and take care of the chores. She had no complaints about taking care of Luis, but her conflicts with Mario had only escalated. She finally realized that her father was, in fact, quite lazy. He only cared about being handsome, charming, and refined. and didn't know how to do anything else. Her brother was a spitting image of their father, shiny on the outside, but hollow on the inside. His words were carefree, and he couldn't move 5 feet away from his bed. With me keeping him in check, Mario didn't dare act out. Now, he does whatever he wants, treating Ava like she doesn't matter at all. Marrying a man like that would probably be a disaster. The neighbor said, Ava really is pitiful. Her brother makes her cry every day. I'm not trying to be mean, but Mario's personality has really gotten bad. He used to be such a polite young man. What happened to him? Mario had never hit rock bottom. He had a good start, came from a good family, and aside from having a mother he couldn't be proud of, his life had been smooth. Now that I'm gone, perhaps he's realizing I wasn't entirely useless as a mother. I thanked my neighbor and told her not to tell me about them anymore. Every child has their own path. Everyone has their own fate, and no one can arrange it for them. The neighbor sighed and said, Well, son, I won't say more. You've worked hard all your life, and now you don't have to be anyone's beast of burden. Live your life well, just for yourself. Yes. Live my life for myself. I sent my manuscript to an editor I know well. It was a story I had been working on for over a decade. I'd revised, cut, and rewritten it so many times that I could never quite find the right ending. The divorce had left me with so many pent-up emotions. And this time, I finally wrote an ending I was happy with. The editor read it overnight and was immediately intrigued, saying it was refreshing and satisfying. The publication process was settled, and the work began. I worked with the editor on revisions, proofreading, confirming the style and layout. Before I knew it, 3 months had passed. Luis was actually going to marry Eva. Mario sent me an invitation personally. The invitation was very formal. Ms. Fiona is cordially invited to the wedding of my father, Luis, and Aunt Eva. Was he bragging that he'd finally get a new mother? I hope he'll always be proud of Eva. I don't plan on going. My time is precious now, and I don't want to waste it on anyone who isn't worth it. In my free time, I started making video edits, analyzing various literary works and interpreting the characters from a new perspective. I'd never edited videos before, and it was difficult at first, but slowly I started to get the hang of it. Before I knew it, the day of the wedding had arrived, but instead of a wedding invite, I received a call from the police. I rushed over and saw Luis with a face dark as thunder, Eva bruised and battered, an enraged Mario, and a defiant Ava, along with many unfamiliar faces. It was only after the police explained that I learned the wedding had not gone through. 2 groups had crashed the event. One was the wife of Eva's old lover. The other was Ava. When Luis's mother fell ill years ago, Eva had broken up with him, using the excuse of moving away for graduate school. In reality, she didn't go to graduate school but instead began an affair with a married man. Over the years, they had broken up and gotten back together numerous times but never fully cut ties. Eventually, she seemed to have seen through it all and focused solely on extracting as much money as she could from him, acquiring a villa, luxury cars, and a cafe, transforming herself into the charming cafe owner. Her old lover would come when he wanted, and if he didn't, it didn't matter. For over 20 years, they coexisted in peace. But recently, her lover had found someone else, and his wife, after investigating, discovered Eva had been his mistress for years. Furious, she destroyed Eva's cafe. Panicked, Eva hastily sought someone to marry, trying to demonstrate that she was no longer involved with her old lover. But the wife, after 20 years of infidelity, was livid. Who could blame her? She wanted to tear Eva apart. So, when she found out Eva was getting married, she immediately showed up to ruin it. As for Eva, she was there purely to vent her anger. She took the microphone and, from the stage, denounced Eva for stringing Luis along for more than 2 decades. I used to be foolish, letting you bully my mom, but now, let me tell you, as long as I'm around, you'll never set foot in our house. I glanced at Eva. She smiled at me, but tears involuntarily streamed down her face. Then, she collapsed onto the table, sobbing. I sighed softly. The cost of growing up was too heavy. Perhaps no one grows without pain. I envied those who could mature without facing storms. But I knew that must be a rare miracle, to live innocently, purely, like a fairy in this world. There must be countless people holding up umbrellas, standing on tiptoes to shield that person from the wind and rain. But families like ours didn't have that luxury. Our growth would inevitably come with scars and self-healing. I had them. Ava would, too. As I was finishing the paperwork, a heavy-set man hurried in. He carried himself with an air of importance, clearly someone of wealth or power. He glanced at Eva, then quickly turned to plead with his wife. She's getting married. I told you she doesn't matter anymore. Why did you come here? Whatever you want. I'll give it to you. If you want to sue, let's go to court. But why get yourself thrown in jail? His wife slapped him hard across the face. What do you take me for? You brought a mistress and now a fourth woman into my life. I'm divorcing you, and I want everything you have. I won't let her go, and I won't let you go either. The man continued to beg, flattering her and making promises. The scene left Luis and Mario stunned, but the most shocked was Eva. She stared in disbelief, then angrily shouted, "Are you even human? I've been with you for over 20 years. But the man ignored her, proceeding to handle the legal paperwork. As he signed next to me, his hand trembled. Out of curiosity and with the intention of gathering material, I voiced my question. Eva's been with you for 20 years, and you don't feel bad for her? She stayed with you all this time, without status, and now you're trying to get the property back? Chapter 12. The man looked surprised for a moment. Are you her friend? Not really. Just an acquaintance, I replied thoughtfully. He snorted. Anyone who becomes a mistress isn't exactly a good woman. I give her money. She gives me a smile. If my wife doesn't find out, then she's lucky. If she does, well, that's not my problem. The law says that money given to a mistress comes from the marital assets. I froze. So, what does that make her? Just unlucky. The man shook his head, signed the paper, and left quickly. The wife, before leaving, glanced at the dazed Eva and sneered. I didn't even know you were getting married today. But my husband's other mistress is catching a flight today. She was afraid I'd show up at the airport, so she gave me your details herself. I had nothing better to do, so I decided to drop by. You've been the mistress for over 20 years, and yet you couldn't get him to divorce me. As far as mistresses go, you're pretty pathetic. With a smirk of triumph, she strutted off, her husband trailing behind like a dog. Eva stood frozen, staring blankly at their retreating figures, her face full of despair. But when she spotted me, her fury erupted. Have you seen enough? Fiona, are you here to laugh at me? You say you don't care about Luis, but deep down, you're dying to take him back and serve him on your knees. You even sent your daughter to ruin my wedding. How low can you go? What did you just say? You're the low one. Don't think everyone's like you. Ava snapped furiously, charging forward, ready to punch her. I quickly pulled her back. Suddenly, I saw Mario grab a chair and smash it over Eva. You old hag. What right do you have to talk about my mom like that? You act all tough in front of my dad, but behind his back, you're just as filthy. The scene descended into chaos. The shouting of the police, Eva's shrieks, Mario's angry cursing, and Luis's desperate attempts to stop it all blended into a cacophony. Countless voices and images filled my mind. Finally, my gaze fixed on Luis's pale face as he collapsed to the ground. Call an ambulance. He has a heart condition. Luis was rushed to the ICU. Mario, Eva, and I waited outside. The red light above the door blinked incessantly. Mario sat slumped, unable to meet my gaze. Eva sat next to me, head bowed in silence. We were a family, yet now we felt like three separate camps. The wait seemed endless. I checked my phone and saw a local news notification. I clicked on it and found that Luis and Eva's wedding had made the local headlines. The scene of chaos and destruction splashed across the screen. The headline was sensational, and there were countless comments. Some were outraged, some mocked, and others offered their philosophical takes on life. In the end, Luis had spent his entire life seeking fame, and now he had achieved it in the most ironic way possible. Chapter 13. Luis was resuscitated. He lay weakly in the hospital bed, looking so worn out that it seemed like he had aged 10 years. The doctor said that he had a heart condition to begin with and that his habit of drinking coffee had worsened it, further stressing his heart. From now on, he would have to give up coffee, exercise more, and maintain a positive mindset. I interrupted the doctor. I'm not a family member. Let me go get the family. I went outside to call Mario, who stared at me in surprise. I spoke calmly. If you care so much about your father, I hope it's not just because you want his house, but because you actually want him in your life. Mario gritted his teeth and went in, listening attentively and nodding occasionally. I took one last glance at him, then turned to leave. Ava called out to me. I turned back to look at her. I still felt tenderness toward her. She's my daughter, and in the end, I can't cut her off. From the moment she was born, I told myself I would raise her well, just as I would have wanted someone to take care of the younger version of myself. That she grew up the way she did is partly my fault. I lived under the pressures of society and failed to provide her with a shelter from the storm. I also lacked the ability to protect her from being eroded by the same world. So, I don't blame her, just as I don't blame my past self. Life gave us countless small warnings of what our futures might hold. But unfortunately, in our youth, we lacked the sharp eyes and perceptive hearts to see the truth. We weren't able to look clearly or think deeply, and instead, we willingly or unwillingly slipped into a predetermined outcome. I don't blame my younger self. I only want to walk the path ahead of me. I have to forget the mess of the past in order to embrace a better future. My daughter deserves the chance to make mistakes too, only then can she truly grow. Ava said softly. Mom, I changed my name. I'm now Rose Sunday. I smiled. It's a beautiful name. Ava smiled too. Mom, can I visit you often from now on? I laughed freely. Of course. The bond between mother and daughter can never be broken. I'm your mother, and I'll always be your mother. Mom, Ava threw herself into my arms, and I gently patted her back, soothing my silly girl. Our relationship can never go back to what it was, but we can find a new way to interact. A new kind of mother-daughter relationship, one where we are independent, respectful, longing for each other yet separate. I'm still exploring it. I'm not sure if it will succeed, but I want to try. When I reached downstairs, I received a message from Mario on WeChat. Mom, I'm sorry. I read the message but didn't reply. I wasn't sure if he was just struggling with the situation and trying to lure me back to become Luis's caretaker again. So, I chose not to respond, not to answer, just to wait and see. If he can save himself, he's still my son. If he can't, then that's how it will be. Let's see what he does. Chapter 14. In the early autumn, Luis was finally discharged from the hospital. His health was frail, so he hired a caregiver to manage his daily needs. The caregiver, of course, couldn't meet his every expectation, but he had learned to endure. He took early retirement and refused to go out, since he had gained fame for marrying his mistress. People online had dubbed him a warrior. Whenever he went out, he felt like people were giving him strange looks. He locked himself at home and started sending me philosophical reflections about life. It was then I realized I hadn't blocked him yet. A simple mistake. Once I blocked him, the world went quiet. Eva, meanwhile, was embroiled in legal battles and left the city. In the end, she couldn't win against the original wife. She lost completely, unable to stay in the city she had known so well. At her age, she had to leave her home behind. As for Mario, it seemed he had grown up. Sometimes, he would come by with gifts, but after leaving them at the door, he'd rush off. I guess he still hadn't figured out how to face me. I hadn't figured out how to accept him, either. And so, we kept things this way, not pushing ourselves or each other. It worked. Rose fell in love. She shared details about the man with me, torn between her career and love, unsure if she should marry, unsure if she wanted children. I thought for a moment and replied, the other day at the police station, I saw that original wife, and to be honest, I envied her. When she faced infidelity, she had the courage and the strength to flip tables and tear things apart. But your mother didn't. I could only shrink within the marriage, surviving in humiliation, being mocked by others, and sometimes even mocking myself for living this way. But when you don't have assets, You don't have the right to be willful as long as you're alive today. You must figure out how to fill your stomach and keep going. Being swept along by life, I had to numb myself into thinking the future might be better. But I don't want that life for you. I hope that when you face injustice, you'll have both the strength and the means to choose whether or not to flip the table. I hope you won't be forced to follow the tide. A long time later, Sun Lan replied to me, "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for being willing to love me again, even after I hurt you." My new book was published. I didn't expect it to sell so well right out of the gate. Thanks to various short videos, many bloggers were analyzing it, and I thought their interpretations were much better than my own. They approached it from angles I hadn't even considered, and it turned out to be quite popular. The publisher planned a book signing for me. On the day of the event, I received a message from an unknown number. "I've read your book. It's beautifully written. After more than 20 years of marriage, I realize I never truly understood you. It was my arrogance and neglect that led to all of this. If there's another life, I hope I won't make the same mistakes." The message was long, but I was too busy to finish reading it. I deleted it and blocked the number. I picked up the book in my hands and listened as the pretty young woman beside me excitedly told me how much she loved it. It made me happy, and her admiration warmed me. I gently wrote, "Time brings out the flavor. Years distill the fragrance. May you live well, Zoe. I wish that young version of you a lifetime of peace."